So, John, talk to me about the PPI numbers. I mean, what's it telling us?
Well, they came out this morning, and when the PPI number comes out, of course, it makes a headline for the overall PPI number. But what a lot of people don't realize is that it's made up of individual sectors. So there's a PPI number, a producer price index number for truck transportation, and I look at it every month, and I usually put a chart out on Twitter. And what it shows is that before the pandemic, the PPI was down like in the 140 level.
Yeah.
Okay, then it stuck around at that low level and then went completely berserk. Going into 2021, when, as we know, we entered like the greatest freight market ever, the strongest freight market ever,
Yeah.
and we're down from those numbers, and we're kind of stuck in this range around 185. And so what's really kind of fascinating is that we've never been at like in the 180s on the PPI, and we've now been in the 180s for like 7 or 8 months. So we're at a cost structure for truck transportation that we've never really been in before. We blew right past the current market to get to the craziest market, and we've come down, but we haven't come down to the levels of pre-pandemic.
So we saw a couple weeks ago, we had all the transportation folks come out and put their numbers out. Nothing promising in anything we read from there. You look at the PPI today, and any correlation to that in the financials that we saw for year end?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I run any numbers, okay? But yeah, I mean, right now the market kind of stinks for carriers, as you said. The quarterly earnings were not good, and the quarterly earnings were not good, and we're at a PPI of like around 185, up and down either side now for months. Maybe it's kind of telling you that that's just not a level that's really good for carriers. That maybe it needs to be higher for carriers to make any money, though they were making money. Um, you know, Pre-pandemic at lower numbers, but it was a whole different cost structure. And you really have to wonder, given the current state of the market, is one of the reasons that things are so bad is that they had to give out so many raises, so much higher driver pay in 2021, 2022, and those are sticky. Yes, I mean the per mile rate for hiring purchase transportation is going to come down, but the sticky numbers that you gave to your company drivers back a couple of years ago, they don't come down, and of course the per mile rate has. And I didn't hear anything in the quarterly earnings that indicate that anybody thinks anything's going to get better by the end of the year. Except the one thing that they did hear is a lot of, and it's backed up by the numbers, are the number of authorities that are disappearing according to the FMCSA data. I think it was the Triumph earnings call,
Yeah.
and 7% of their carriers in January alone had dropped about 7% in January compared to where it was in December from users of their system. And so yeah, there's signs that capacity is retreating. It just isn't retreating fast enough.
You go back to some of the quarterly earnings, and I just think these are things that are going to have to happen for the market to even begin to adjust. And what I'm going to talk about is like what Werner said, where they're going to pull out of that over-the-road fleet, not be as strong, focus more on their dedicated side, where you see some of these trucks maybe exiting the over-the-road fleet and going more to a dedicated approach, as a lot of these companies have done in this market. I'm going to talk to what you said there because 100%. I mean, trucking companies gave out raises, and that's what had to be, and you can't take those back. What we haven't seen as well is we are all out there still paying for trucks and trailers that we've never paid so much for ever in our lives. I'm talking 35 to 50% increases on that kind of equipment, 35% increase on tractors, and many of us saw easy 75% increase on trailers. And the rates today, they don't substantiate. They don't allow a carrier the ability to pay that driver increase and to pay that equipment cost based on the current rates. I mean, it's a tough market.
I did the earnings for Ryder. And, Ryder is really a kind of a three-headed beast. It's the traditional fleet management system, the leasing of trucks.
Yep.
Their contract logistics, known as SCS, and their a dedicated group, which got a lot bigger because they bought Cardinal Logistics. So, and they're trying to diversify. They don't want to be so dependent upon the leasing side, but their economics, their earnings are still very dependent upon the price of used trucks because they've got this gigantic fleet and they're selling thousands of trucks every quarter. And their bottom line earnings were not great this quarter. I shouldn't say this quarter, but the last quarter. And the biggest reason I think was the used truck numbers were lousy compared to last year. So this is what happened. You're right. The numbers on new vehicles and used truck prices a year ago were tremendous. And then the market came up and bid everybody, and the market fell, and the used truck prices have fallen too. And nobody's seeing that probably more so than Ryder. I don't know that there's a company out there, at least a publicly traded company, whose economics and finances are tied more to the price of used trucks than Ryder.
Yeah, we've seen that used price trucks again. They're even lower today than they were a year ago. Much lower
Well, a
today
lot. I mean,
than they were
the
a year
numbers.
ago.
I think Ryder said that their average tractor price was down about 30% from a quarter ago.
And John, I remember first quarter of last year, all of us just complaining about the year, how it started. And I go back and I look at the same thing. How many of these publicly traded companies, how many trucking companies across America would love to have a crappy first quarter like we had in 2023 right now? I think we didn't. We proved last year we didn't have a clue on what we thought the market would do. I don't think we're in any better state today, meaning I don't think any of us can say that, okay, expect a July it's going to turn around. I think we're still in that same area that we found ourselves in last year and not really knowing when this is going to stop.
I remember there was a Wall Street analyst who told me a while ago that he thought the best capacity number out there is the BCO number at Landstar. The number of active trucks and the number of the BCOs, the business capacity owners, are leased to Landstar, and they publish that number every quarter, and then they also publish a number on just active carriers, and an active carrier just has to pull a Landstar load one time in the quarter to get on that list. It really shows that the capacity at Landstar has dropped considerably, and by the fourth quarter compared to the first. So, I mean, if that Wall Street analyst is accurate, and the Landstar numbers are a really good indicator of capacity, then you can fairly say that capacity is exiting the market. You take that number, and you take it along with the FMCSA numbers and the other anecdotal things that were said on earnings calls, like I just said about, I think Triumph said it lost, 7% of its carriers that had been factoring with them just disappeared from December to January. You get that in there, and you got to say, the capacity does seem to be finally capitulating to the market.
Do you have any thoughts around the government, what they're going to find when they look at these lease purchases from these owner-operators? I think the larger the company, probably the safer they are. But what about that 30, 40, 100 truck fleet that has a lease purchased that's probably is predatory? You think we're going to see anything and make changes on that in the government side?
Well, I mean, clearly they are interested. My colleague John Gallagher has been reporting on that effort. This has obviously been an issue for a long time.
John, did you write I think you wrote the article on I think it was a couple months ago regarding CRST and drivers in the sleeper berth, the ruling that came against CRST on that. Was that your article or?
Yeah, it was. Let me see if I can remember it now, because I think.
So you know what it was. It was intriguing to me because it was kind of speaking to the drivers that were in the sleeper berth that they didn't have the freedom to go out and do anything because they were stuck in the sleeper berth. And they still say they could have came on the clock 2 hours ago. It kind of was saying, hey, they still got to get paid for that because they're not the same as an employee that works that can be at home and has the freedom to do what they can. They still have to they got to get paid. And I'm kind of going back to that. I wanted to talk to you about that article the day it came out.
Let's point something out. I mean, for the time that's legitimately sleeping, when you reach your hours of service and you're legitimately off the clock, that's not an issue. That was not an issue in the CRST case. It's sort of when that's done and you're in the back and you're not doing anything and you really can't do anything, but you certainly don't have your freedom. But really, the issue also involved minimum wage. So if you're in a team and you're on a run that's making a lot of money, okay, you're probably going to be okay. I mean, I should say your employer is probably going to be okay because you probably made so much money that if you divide it up over the hours, not just behind the wheel, but also in that sleeper berth when you're sort of not free, you probably made more money than you would have made had you been paid minimum wage. The issue would come if you've got some run that really is not going to pay you all that much. and then you do the math, and lo and behold, you didn't even make minimum wage if you figure out also the hours in the sleeper berth. So the issue really comes into minimum wage. Nobody's going to get paid, $16 an hour for that time in the sleeper berth. It's only going to come into issue if what you're making on the run is so low that when you divide your total number of hours, including the sleeper berth hours, you didn't make minimum wage.
Are you hearing any kind of feedback from the larger carriers as well? Because that's who I think this really affects, those team-oriented companies, the Schneiders, or those. Did you hear any feedback after this ruling came out from other carriers as well?
No, I didn't. To be honest, I didn't really chase any, but I didn't see any statements by organizations like ATA
Yeah, I didn't either, actually.
that this was the end of the world. So
because I looked at it and I read it and I was like, yeah, that's it definitely, again, it's one of those things that is going to make you as a company go back, much like your independent contractor, go back and look at how you're running your business today. I mean, I think that there's so many of these rules, these things that are happening today that make you, or that I don't say make you, but you as a carrier, let me tell you, you've got to go back and review your business all the time based on the changes that we're seeing today in transportation.
Well, let's just hope that these teams are making so much money on their runs that if somebody raised the question to them, do you think you made minimum wage on this? They go, well, of course I did. that settles the issue right there.
Yeah, for sure. No, that, John, I appreciate your time. I just, I really do. I was talking to some people. I was like, sometimes it's just nice to, to get 2 or 3 of us and just, I don't want to say ramble, but ramble. Let's just talk about a few things, and we can edit it, and we'll send it to you first before we do anything with it. But there's just, I thinking right now, think about all the articles that you're writing now. Gallagher's writing. Everybody's writing. Wall Street Journal has, from Paul, that everybody's writing these things. There is so much really going on in transportation every day. I just think more than I've ever seen in transportation is happening all the time. And I'm not saying that everything's negative affecting the trucking companies, but boy, it's a lot of stuff going on, just a lot of activity.
Well, I just think that the supply chain crisis coming out of COVID made so many people aware of the supply chain, and the realization that if it wasn't for the truckers who stayed on the road during COVID, we would have been totally screwed. I think that really opened up a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. John, I appreciate you. Hey, thank you for making the time today.